Okay, everyone. So here's what I want you guys to do. So hopefully that worked out with creating your own HTML file and previewing in a browser. We're going to work from the drills now. So what's going to happen is I'm going to lecture and I'm going to kind of present some things. What we do here is really just for practice. Like I said before, you don't have to turn this stuff in. It's really just for practice. So don't worry if yours does not look like mine because I'm not grading this, okay? So what I want you guys to do is in the files that I gave you, I want you to open up exercise 1 hello world. So the way that you can do that is a couple ways. You can go to File, Open, and then if go to the folder and then find exercise 1 hello world. Or if you've set up the workspace, you should have it within your folder list here, and you can just click on exercise 1. So what I want to do here is this is our document, and before I do anything, let's just kind of look at it. So if you look over this, there's some text. This is Latin, in case you're wondering what it is. And then right in the middle, it says, make this sentence bold, make this sentence bold, make this sentence bold, right? And what I'm going to do is let's preview this in a browser. So I'm just going to right click, and I'm going to use that open in default browser that I showed you in the last video. I'm just going to click. And this is what I get. I blew it up a little bit just so it's a little easier for you to read. Don't worry if yours does not look exactly this large. But if you look at it, I got a bunch of text, right? And in theory, if you take this at literal face value, this is supposed to be bold, right? But it's not. It's capitalized. This is uppercase, but it's not bold, right? So even though I kind of told the browser, or even though I told in my code, I said, hey, make this sentence bold, nothing really happened here, right? So why does that happen? Well, let's talk a little bit about HTML, okay? When the thing about computers, and when I say computers, I just mean like technology, like, applications and things like that. Your browser, even though the browser literally kind of like goes through this code, it starts at the top and it kind of goes, top down, left to right. Even though it does do that, what it doesn't do is it doesn't actually read it, okay? It doesn't read it in the way that you and I as humans would read this. We would read this as, Latin if you understand Latin, but at least we can kind of go, oh, okay, there's some text, and in the middle it says, make this bold, right? Your computer, the browser knows that there's stuff there, like it knows that there's text, but it doesn't read the text. You know what I mean? The way I kind of like to think of it is like, when you're a kid and you may play a game where like, you're blindfolded and someone gives you an object and you have to like try to figure out what the object is, even though you can't see it. Or like sometimes you like put your hand in a pillowcase or a bag or something and you got to like root around and figure something out. It's kind of like that. Like the browser knows that there's content. It knows that there's text. If there was an image, it knows that there's an image. If there's a video, it knows that there's a video. But it doesn't like read the text. It doesn't like look at the image and go, oh, that's a dog or that's someone's breakfast. It just kind of goes, oh, there's an image, but I don't know what it is. Same with video or audio. It's like it knows there's a video. It couldn't tell you what the video is, but it knows that it exists. You know what I mean? And the way I kind of look at it, so we have all this content. The content is like, what we write in the pages, text or images or whatever. And the content is kind of like, I like to think of it like a piece of clay in that, clay is something that is by default, it's just kind of amorphous. It doesn't really, quote unquote, look like anything. But eventually you can take clay and you can mold it to look like something, right? You can make it look like a vase or a human face or whatever it is that you want the clay to look like, right? And so, the browser's like looking at our text here and it's just kind of seeing it as kind of this weird amorphous thing and it doesn't really know what to do with it. So I talked about, well, you can take clay and you can mold it, right? And kind of make it into something. Well, how do you take this text and make it into something? Well, the answer is that the browser needs more information than what I'm giving it. Right now, all I'm giving it is just some text, But the browser needs to know more about this text. So what we can do is we need to start categorizing things or labeling things. I can start to label this text, and I can say certain things about this text, okay, using those labels. Those labels will give the browser more information, and the browser is going to be like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, this is this thing, this is that thing, okay? So, in a lot of ways, HTML is kind of a lot like organization, okay? Creating an organization system. If you're not the kind of person who's a very organized person, you know, this might be harder for you, but that's kind of what we're doing here. And one thing I want to kind of talk about when it comes to categorization is when you categorize something, it helps if you're more specific. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, let's say I say the word clothing. I say close your eyes, and I want you to think about clothing, like the word or the term clothing. The problem with that is clothing is very vague, right? Clothing could be shirts, it could be pants, it could be socks, it could be Halloween costumes, you know, those are clothing. A lot of things are clothing, right? Swimsuits, I don't know, like bathrobes, whatever, right? So that's really vague. And so if I say clothing, we're all probably thinking about different things, probably. But if I'm more specific with my labels, with my terms, if I say shirt, granted there's a lot of types of shirts, but like that's at least more specific, you know what I mean? Or I say dress, or I say socks, you know, now we're kind of pinpointing something more specific, right? We're saying, okay, I know what a sock is. Now granted, they could be different colors or patterns, but at least it's more specific than just saying clothing, you know what I mean? Another analogy I like to think of is like, imagine you had a closet, okay? And it's full of all these different articles of clothing, right? You know, you can see here there's like shirts and dresses and shoes and handbags and all this kind of stuff, right? And then imagine you had like a pen and you had like a post-it notes and you went through and you like literally labeled everything. You said like, this is a, you know, this is a handbag, this is a handbag, this is a handbag, this is a handbag, this is a shirt, this is a shirt, this is a shirt, this is clothes, you know, shoes, this is shoes, you know, for everything, okay? It would kind of look like this. That is what we're going to be doing conceptually, just as in the sort of programming sense. We're going to label things by giving them some sort of, by creating what's called an HTML tag. Okay. What an HTML tag does is HTML tags structure or label content in a web page. All right. So this is what an HTML tag will look like. HTML tags always start with what's called an opening tag. An opening tag comes in these angled brackets like this. And then it comes with some sort of name. That name is whatever the label is, or the categorization. Okay. So we have an opening tag, and then eventually we have what's called a closing tag. A closing tag is a repetition of the opening tag with a / in front of it. Okay. This is to denote the beginning of a tag. This is to denote the end of a tag. And then the thing in between, which we call the element, is the thing that is labeled or the thing that is structured. Okay. So I'm going to go back here. Let's try this out. We're going to be using actually what the first HTML tag we're going to use is called strong. What strong does is it'll take text and it will label it as being bold. Okay. So it bolds text essentially. So I'm going to go inside here, and I'm just going to go into here, and I'll blow this up a little bit, so it's a little easier for you guys to see. I'm going to put in a tag, the strong tag. So I'm going to type in the word strong. So I'm using the right-facing angled bracket, strong, and then left-facing. Okay, so this is my opening tag. You can see, at least in Visual Studio Code, it's making it blue to denote that it's an HTML tag. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to go back to Chrome. Let's take this, and let's refresh. And you're going to see that there's going to be a change. So I'm going to hit refresh. Everything becomes bold now, right? Or at least everything past this point. So it makes this sentence bold. Not only that, though, it makes everything past it bold as well. You can see it keeps bolding. And if I added more text to this document, it would just keep making all my text bold. The reason for that is I've started it here, but I never told it to stop. So what this is saying is it's saying, well, start making things bold. I'm labeling this as bold, but it never says to stop labeling it as bold. So it just kind of keeps going. So the way to stop it is we're going to use a closing tag. So the way you use a closing tag is you're going to go to, repeat the opening tag and put in a / there. Okay. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to go back, and let's refresh this once again. And then there you go. Okay, so it only makes this one sentence bold, and the rest of it is not bolded. Okay. Now the reason why it's doing it this way is I've given the browser more information. I have said to the browser, first of all, I've said, here's some text, it's Latin, blah, blah, blah. But I've also said, hey, browser, see this sentence here? This sentence is strong, or it's bold, and you should treat it like it's bold. So the browser's like, oh, okay, I get it. This is bold, so I'll just make it bold, and then it did. Okay, so that's what an HTML tag does. It structures the information in your web page in a way that the browser understands and that the browser can then do more with. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up exercise 2, which is called paragraphs. And let's look at, this is just instructions, so don't worry about these right now. But if you take a look here, I want you to look at this, okay? And I want you to, just think for a moment, how many paragraphs are there? Okay, so I'm just going to pause for a second, or, pause this video for a second and think about it. All right, hopefully you spent a moment to think about it. The answer is that there's 2. Okay, now, how do we know that there's 2 paragraphs? Well, there's a space here, right? And at least in English, when you have a space separating large chunks of text, that denotes the end of one paragraph and the beginning of a second paragraph. Okay, so in other words, even though this is empty space, the space denotes something. It denotes the beginning and the end of a paragraph. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, and I'm going to open this in a browser. And I don't know if I can put both on the screen at the same time. Maybe I can, but if we look at this, you can see that although here in my actual code, there's a space between this paragraph and this paragraph, when it actually previews or parses in the browser, there's no space, right? It just kind of goes right from here into the next, it's kind of a run-on sentence, right? And even if I added a third paragraph, this is a third paragraph. Once again, it's continuously just run-on paragraph, okay? Now, why does that happen here, but it doesn't have, why is it that white space here isn't kept when, we preview this in a browser? And that's because when it comes to HTML, white space, as it's called, or also just sort of, empty space is ignored, okay? So what I mean by that is the browser is concerned with data. It's not concerned with not data, okay? So when you load in this page, this HTML page into your browser, all computers always work top down, left to right. And what I mean by that is, when you load this in, your browser is going to start at the top of the document, work its way down, and it's going to read from left to right defaultly, okay? So it's going to start, this is the first piece of real data, and it's going to read, and then it sees this empty space and it goes, oh, well, this is useless, I don't need this, and it kind of just jumps over it, and it goes to there, read. Oh, this is empty space. I don't care about this. And it kind of jumps over it. Read. And that's how we get something that looks like this. Okay. Problem is, this isn't what I want. I want to have those paragraphs because the spaces mean something in English. They mean, like the beginning and the end of a paragraph. So how do I keep them? The answer is I need to structure them using tags, HTML tags. So what I can do is I'm going to come in here and we're going to use a new tag called the P tag. The P tag defines a paragraph. Okay. So what I'm going to do is come in here, put in, this is my opening tag, angle brackets. And when I'm done, I'm going to close it. Okay. This is my opening tag. This is my closing tag. This is the thing that it structures or it labels. What I'm labeling is I'm saying, hey, this is a paragraph and you should treat it like a paragraph. So I'm going to save and I'm going to refresh. And you can see now when it hits the end of the paragraph, it skips a line. At any point, you can always repeat tags. So I want to create this as my second paragraph. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to do the same thing. This is my opening tag. This is my closing tag. This is the thing that it will structure. I'm labeling this as a paragraph as well. So this is my first paragraph, second paragraph, save. Let's see, it's putting space here. And anytime I add a new paragraph, I would just keep doing this. It's okay to repeat them. You don't have to number them. Sometimes I see students do like P1, P2, P3. That's not the way you should do it. You're just labeling it as a paragraph. There's no numbers to it. Okay. What's also kind of interesting thing about this white space being ignored is we can kind of use it to our advantage. So here, this is how my document looks. But it's a little hard to read, right? Because it's like there's all these tags and they're all really close to each other. Since white space is basically ignored and it won't affect the final web page itself when it's previewed or loaded into a browser, what if I just kind of did this? What if I kind of spaced these out? Right? I can do that. It doesn't affect anything. Or a lot of times what people will do to show hierarchy is if something is with, to show that an element is within a tag, it might indent it. See how, and once again, this white space is going to be ignored. It doesn't affect the final output. But this becomes a little bit easier to read, right? So, not everything we do in coding is necessarily for the browser. A lot of times it is, but in this case, it's more for us to be able to read it and look at it and understand it as humans, rather than just, setting it up for the browser itself. So what I want you guys to do, so I'm going to save, and you can see that work. So I want you guys to pause the video. I want you guys to try working with the strong tag and working with paragraphs or the P tag.